This week, we talk about Apple's brief falling out with the Chinese government. Also, they're working on their own TV studio. There's a new Essential phone out there. And then there's some Atari news. And more, as we, together, as a people, check it out. And I'm here on another sophisticated Saturday to bring you my Saturday news show, which is also called Mike Text It Out. It's the same name as the channel. I don't know. I need to change the name. We're going to workshop that. But let's go ahead and get into our first story. So, Essential, founded by Andy Rubin, one of the founders or creators of Android, they showed off their new Essential phone prototype that they're working on. And to me, it looks kind of weird though. It looks like a Harmony remote almost. It's like half the width of this phone and it's like super long. It reminds me of the iPhone 5 memes back in the day when everybody was criticizing Apple because instead of making the phone wider and taller, they just made it taller. And I'm gonna put a picture up on the screen just so y'all know what I'm talking about. But it reminded me of that. It's an interesting design. I don't know if it's gonna be for everyone. I know they're trying to do something different, and I definitely applaud them for trying to do something different. Apparently, they're running their own version of Android that's optimized to take advantage of this form factor. But I have to see the phone in person or hear more about the phone to find out, if there's really a use for this form factor, if it's just kind of like, look at me, I'm different thing. Because if it's a look at me, I'm different thing, no, I think most people are going to say no thank you. If they're offering something unique with this form factor, that'd be kind of cool. They're calling it Project Gem, so we're going to have to see how this evolves, what it turns into, and if it'll kill us all and take over the world. We'll find out. In our next story involving Atari, which I don't think I've ever covered on this channel, but if you hadn't heard, Atari is working on their own retro console, because how that was a thing. You had the NES Classic, SNES, PlayStation Mini, or PlayStation Classic. PlayStation Tragic is more like it. And then, of course, now you have the Genesis Mini. So Atari's been working on their own retro console. So their lead architect on that project just quit. They quit. And that could mean that the project's in trouble. Personally, when I heard about the project, considering that Atari is like kind of in a weird position. Atari's weird. They're weird. All right. I don't know what's going on. Obviously, Atari's changed ownership a lot. And as latest company, they did some weird stuff. They were selling smart hats, cryptocurrency, and they've come out with other bootleg Atari consoles, or they license them. So it's just, I never had high hopes for this. It's supposed to be some kind of Android box with games up there. They're gonna have an app store where developers can develop games for it. That's what the rumor was with this project, and that's generally not my cup of tea anyway as far as gaming, because I'd rather just play those games on a phone if that's the case than to have like a dedicated box for it. I'm not saying that's just me personally. Maybe some people will find value in it. But Atari's a mess. So we'll see if they can turn this thing around. Maybe it'll end up being cool. Maybe I'll have a look at it. But my hopes aren't high for it, and it's not just because of the lead architect leaving. So again, this is one of those wait and see things, like everything with the news. So we shall wait and we shall see. My mind, hopes and expectations are not very high. Alright, in our next story, I'm going to briefly touch on Apple TV Plus. So it recently came out that Apple is starting their own TV studio, which makes sense because they're invested in this TV Plus stuff. Even though it hasn't launched yet, they want to become a serious player in this space, with their services. Honestly, Apple Arcade has been doing, from what I've heard, it's been doing well. I personally like it a lot. Apple TV Plus, still not as sold on, but the rumor is they're starting their own studio, and then they're supposed to be working on a sequel to Band of Brothers that they're going to produce themselves. I think they're going to stick it out until they have their library built, because I think in Apple's mind, they don't have to be number one for a while, or even close to number one, to make that money or to make it work for Apple TV Plus, especially at $5 a month. So it makes sense that they're going to start with these few shows, and then they're going to build it from there. I don't think the initial offering is going to be exciting, but I am interested to see how the service continues to grow in the future and what their offerings will be. And then speaking of Apple, so there's been this whole thing with them allowing this app in their app store in China. And it's called, I believe it's HK Maps Live. So initially, about a week ago, they rejected the app. And basically what the app is, it allows users of the apps to see where, police locations are. Like, I want to say, they're not hideouts, but, where the police are stationed, basically, allows them to see where the protests are going on. And the app creators claim that it's so Hong Kong residents can safely travel the streets, and avoid protests and whatnot. So initially they rejected the app. They changed their mind. So they allowed the app up there. And then the Chinese government got very mad at them. They're like, hey, that's stupid for you to allow this app up here. People are using it to cause violence against the police. Blah, blah, blah. And so then I was like, oh snap, Apple beefing with the Chinese government. No, but then the next day they removed the app. And then they put out a statement basically saying that they think that the app has the potential to endanger people, and so that's why they removed it. So the thing is, initially people were mad at Apple for rejecting the app. People that are obviously, these protests are related to democracy, some democracy law in Hong Kong. I'm not going to get into it, but people were mad at them for rejecting it because they're like, oh, they're supporting the Chinese government. And then when they accepted it, the Chinese government got mad at them, and now the other side's mad at them again. My stance on the whole thing is Apple as a company, they're going to do what's best for them as a company. And what's best for them as a company is not to go over to another country and pick either side politically, is to try to stay as neutral as possible. I don't know why they rejected the app initially and then approved it. It could have been a number of reasons why they rejected the app. They might not have rejected the app just because they supported one side or the other. There could have been some technical reason. And then maybe they fixed that and they put the app up there and then they got the backlash and they're like, oh, well, we got to remove the app. So who knows what happened as far as that part of it. But I understand why they removed the app. Now, I understand why people are mad about that decision as well. This is a very touchy subject when it comes to anything political. So I understand both sides of it. I'm just going to tell you that any company, whether you like them or not, they're not your friend. They're going to do what's best for business. And it's not that I'm really defending Apple as much as they're just another company doing business in China. And if having that app up there is going to potentially cause them not to be able to sell phones in China and lose that user base, of course they're going to pull the app. That makes the most sense for them. So I'm just looking at it from a business standpoint and what Apple did. Again, I don't know why they allowed the app in the first place. That's a whole different thing, but I can understand why they pulled it because they don't want to lose that market share in China. Because the Chinese government can easily say, especially with all the other stuff going on with the U.S. banning a lot of Chinese companies and like blacklisting Huawei, it could easily turn into the situation where like, well, we're not going to allow you to sell iPhones anymore in China. Whew, that was a lot. So let's just finish up here strong. And how can we finish strong? By talking about the strongest home console in the biz right now, the PlayStation, at least for right now. So Sony released some little teasers, little tidbits of information about the PlayStation 5. First of all, they confirmed the name. Let's get ready for it. It's going to be the PlayStation 5. Woo! Yes! Oh, I was so worried they're going to call it the PlayStation Humble Ship or the PlayStation Chumbawamba, but no, coming with the PlayStation 5. They said it's gonna be out basically at the end of 2020, which everybody expected. They didn't give a firm release date. It's pretty much holiday 2020. They gave a little bit more details about the controller. This is what I found interesting. So it's gonna use haptics this time instead of a traditional rumble motor, like in the older controllers. For those people not familiar with it, it's the same thing that the Nintendo Switch is doing with the regular Switch console. Actually, not the Lite. The Lite doesn't have HD rumble, but it's the same thing where you can control the level of like how much it rumbles. For Nintendo's purpose, they made it so that way you can make it feel like things are rolling around in the controller, which I don't think any other games other than 1-2 Switch have actually used that. They had a game where you had to like feel how many marbles were in the controller. It's the same technology. Obviously, Sony's probably not going to use it in this way. It can make the game more immersive because It can vibrate harder during certain times and softer at other times. So it's a good change. I don't think it'll make that much of a difference, honestly. The one thing I was excited about, the triggers R2 and L2 are gonna be force. I almost want to say force sensitive, but that just reminds me of something else. But they're going to be pressure sensitive, kind of like they can be tuned. So the game developers can basically make it harder to pull the triggers at certain moments. Like they can control the force of it. That, in my opinion, can make the game more immersive. I'm thinking about shooters, like, you know, different kind of guns with different kind of triggers. It's crazy to see what developers are going to be able to do with this technology. It's not a lot of information. Of course, we're probably going to get a big info dump next year, probably mid next year around E3 time. I don't know if Sony's actually going to go to E3 this year. It doesn't really matter if they do or not, but we'll see what happens. I think it's still going to be around that time frame, though, when they give us like the full details and actual release date, that we get to see how it looks, and then they do the demos and all that stuff. So I'm expecting that. I'm very interested in it, especially with the little details that have come out so far, the ray tracing, the new controller stuff. We'll see, but seeing is believing, and I believe that it's time to bring this episode to a conclusion. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker. If you like it, like it. If you dislike it, dislike it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more. I do tech news every Saturday. I'll be back on Tuesday with my iPhone quick review. And until then, remember to always do at least 2 things at the same time. Peace.